She dies just 3 years after the fall of the monarchy, far from Prussia, far from the splendor, while her children struggle to find their place in a new world. Did Empress Augusta Victoria share some blame for the empire's downfall? Was she merely a victim or also part of the problem? And what happened to the emperor's children? Augusta Victoria was born on October 22, 1858, in Dolzig Castle in Lusacia, a small town situated in what is now Poland, close to Bad Muskau and Forst. Together with her siblings, she grew up in a sheltered environment, far from the glamour of grand courts. On February 27, 1881, she stepped into a completely different world. In Berlin, she married Prince Wilhelm of Prussia, who was the son of Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm and British Princess Victoria. A daughter of Queen Victoria, Wilhelm was a grandson of Emperor Wilhelm I, and the future heir to the throne of the German Empire. As the German Empress and Prussian Queen, Augusta Victoria perfectly embodied the ideal image of a monarchic wife of her time. She remained detached from politics, never pursued power, and instead dedicated her life to duty, piety, and charitable deeds. Traditionally seated and deeply religious, she primarily dedicated herself to charitable tasks, hospitals, care for the poor, and supporting wounded soldiers. After the firstborn son Wilhelm in 1882, 6 more children followed, each with their own distinct and personal story. In the years that followed, Eitel Friedrich was born into the world, followed by Adalbert, August Wilhelm, Oskar, and finally Joachim in 1890. The crowning conclusion finally arrived in 1892 with the birth of their one and only daughter, Viktoria Luise. This family has consistently held a pivotal role in shaping the nation's emotional fabric. In the monarchical form of government, the life of the ruling family inevitably moved into the public eye. Even the youngest royal or imperial children swiftly became significant symbolic figures. Accompanied by the watchful eyes of an entire nation, their images quickly circulated throughout the land. Their names were deeply connected to old Prussian tradition. When Augusta Victoria married into the House of Hohenzollern in the 1880s, the German Empire appeared stable and powerful. The economy surged, factories were smoking, and Germany rose to become Europe's leading industrial nation. Berlin also changed. Millions moved from the countryside to the city in search of work. The workers' living conditions were harsh and dire, with unrest steadily simmering beneath. Social tensions, political disagreements, and the rigid structure of the empire laid the essential groundwork for rising conflicts. While society outside was going through transformations, a new generation was rising within the imperial family. In a world that was soon fated to vanish completely. In the House of Hohenzollern, the military tradition was omnipresent. It was customary for every male descendant to join the 1st Regiment by the age of 10. Guard Regiment at the age of 10. So, on his 10th birthday in 1892, the Crown Prince proudly received the uniform of this regiment from his father, who remarked with a smile, "Finally, I have something sensible to wear." The cadet school of Plön near Kiel, a true breeding ground for the Prussian military's future leaders. Here, they are supposed to be trained as soldiers. The Kaiser had a former pleasure palace prepared for his children, the Prinzenschule. They had their own small classes where discipline shaped the daily lives of the young princes. They were not just sons, they were representatives of a dying system, and they all had to reinvent themselves after the upheaval. The emperor's presence was limited to him slowly passing by the small private railway station that the princely school in Plön had at the time, with the imperial train moving at a walking pace. The princes then stood on the platform. With a militarily precise salute, they returned the gaze of their father, who in turn formally saluted back from the moving train. As soon as this brief moment passed, the royal train accelerated again and continued its journey, heading towards Kiel for Kiel Week, or whatever else was on the Kaiser's schedule. After the Abitur exam, the young princes were traditionally assigned to the 1st Foot Guards Regiment in Potsdam. But for the 4th son of the Kaiser, August Wilhelm, who was already lovingly called Prince Auwi as a young man, the military was not meant to be the path of his life. He, who had a deep passion for art, painting and poetry, and who loved to practice dressing up and storytelling, clearly stood apart from his brothers, whose lives were more strongly influenced by the military masculine ideal. So Auwi left the army after just half a year to forge his own path and enrolled in university studies. Meanwhile, the heir to the throne, Wilhelm took a completely different path. As an officer through and through, with a firm principle of serving less but more energetically, he was the exact opposite of his brother. Despite having rather limited political knowledge, Wilhelm did not shy away from offering his imperial father unsolicited advice, which earned him the reputation of being a bit of an odd one out in the family. But the young crown prince, known for his effect on the ladies, not only won many hearts, but also found his chosen one in 1905. In the young Duchess Cecilia of Mecklenburg. The 18-year-old Cecilia was considered a natural beauty who, with her taste for extravagant hats and especially her impeccable pedigree, fit perfectly into the imperial image. It almost feels like a Greek tragedy. Just when fate seemed to be turning, it took its relentless and inevitable course. In 1913, the German Empire shone in its full glory. Parades, grand celebrations with monarchs from across all of Europe. The dot. 25th anniversary of Wilhelm II's reign, the centennial commemoration of the Wars of Liberation against Napoleon at Leipzig's monument, and as the grand finale, the wedding of his daughter Viktoria Luise to Duke Ernst August of Brunswick. This wedding turned Berlin into the dazzling center of European nobility, as even the British King George V and the Russian Tsar Nicholas II, both closely connected to the German imperial family, were present at the festivities, a profound bond of family connection, stronger than any kind of political conflict. But it was only a fleeting glimmer before the storm. 1 year later, Sarajevo. An assassination. Seemingly distant, it ignited the powder keg. Alliances interlocked like gears, and the emperor found himself overwhelmed by his own powerlessness. Europe rolled towards war. The lights, they went out. For an entire age, darkness took hold. On August 1st, 1914, Kaiser Wilhelm II signed the mobilization order. The Kaiser's sons now had to serve in the Prussian army. Crown Prince Wilhelm received supreme command of the 5th Army, which was deployed on the Western Front. What his father thought of his abilities, he personally let them know. Congrats on the win achieved with God's help. He gave you the Iron Cross 2nd Class. And 1st Class, greet your brave troops with my thanks and that of the fatherland. Well done, I am proud of you, your faithful father Wilhelm. The other Kaiser's sons are also going to war. Prince Eitel Friedrich and Prince Oskar led a regiment. The third Kaiser's son, Adalbert, became an officer on a battleship. Only one stood out as an exception. Prince August Wilhelm was considered an aesthete. He, described more like a tourist, was often seen around the battlefields rather than actually taking on military responsibilities. Throughout the war, his primary duties revolved around capturing photographs and crafting melancholic poems. When the calamity could no longer be denied in the fall of 1918, when hunger, war weariness, and uprising shook the country, the revolution broke out in Germany. On November 9th, Reich Chancellor Prince Max of Baden acted on his own. He announced the abdication of Wilhelm II. Without his knowledge, without his approval. It was a desperate attempt to signal a significant shift to the Allies. But it was a fallacy. On November 28th, the former emperor finally bowed to the inevitable. In Amerongen, while living in Dutch exile, Wilhelm II signed his abdication. An empire had fallen, and with it, a man who truly believed he was upheld by divine right. After the end of the monarchy, a world collapsed for the emperor's children. The courtly life, their core existence, vanished suddenly. Prince August Wilhelm was deeply shaken and sought refuge in a military hospital. When he observed the emperor's portrait being taken down, he broke into tears and found it nearly impossible to accept the new reality. His marriage with Alexandra also crumbled shortly after, because the arranged union couldn't hold together without the monarchy. All of this plunged Prince Auwi into a deep personal crisis. The marriages of Adolf Friedrich and the youngest son, Prince Joachim, also fell apart after the revolution. Prince Joachim committed suicide. Prince August Wilhelm's brother Wilhelm also faced difficult challenges after the revolution. He lived on the island of Wieringen in the Netherlands, in rather modest circumstances, in a small former fishing village, and occupied 2 rooms in an abandoned parsonage. It was the low point of his life with the abdication of his person from the throne. Only in 1923 was he allowed to return to Germany. This was connected with the condition that the return was to be carried out as secretly as possible and, above all, without any political prominence. At least in 1926, the expropriation of the princely families was rejected in a popular referendum. They got back a portion of their wealth. Crown Princess Cecilia resided in one of Germany's most celebrated and historic Renaissance castles, Oels Castle. In 1885, the castle came into the possession of the House of Hohenzollern and was transferred to the respective crown prince. In eager anticipation, the crown princess and her 6 children awaited her beloved husband's return. On the estate, the crown prince actively managed the 36,000 acres of farmland, the livestock, and the forestry. Oels Castle was for all family members the place of a quiet, beautiful family life. Of course, the sports-loving crown prince kept being drawn back to Berlin for riding tournaments or horse races. On the other hand, he also started playing the famous Amati violin again, which once belonged to Frederick the Great. He also arranged for the entire regimental band at Oels Castle to learn to play the balalaika, because Cecilia particularly loved this instrument. Wilhelm's sister, Viktoria Luise, who had initially fled to Austria after the revolution, also eventually found recognition again in her former Duchy of Brunswick and was received there as a highly esteemed guest. Augusta Victoria found little solace during this time while living in exile in Doorn together with Wilhelm II. There in her new house, she deeply missed her 7 children and started to grapple with the past, especially with the decision not to make use of any kind of force against the revolutionary soldiers in 1918. She wonders if the uprising could have been suppressed by the authorities at the time. The Empress died in April 1921 in exile in Doorn. Her last concern was for her husband, the former Emperor Wilhelm II, whom she didn't want to leave alone. Meanwhile, she herself also played a part in Wilhelm ultimately losing his crown, as she firmly opposed any real democratization. After her death, her body was transported to Potsdam, and along the way, hundreds of thousands of former subjects lined the streets. Her family, former princes and imperial generals also paid their respects to her. For the children of the Empress, the fall of the monarchy was not just the end of a form of government, it was the end of their identity. They didn't just lose a throne, but the future they had been carefully trained and prepared for their entire lives. They were Prussia's hope, but what remained was a past that no longer belonged to them and a future they were never truly prepared to face or fully embrace. Augusta Victoria stayed by her husband's side out of love until the very end, but out of conviction, she rejected any democratization. Thus, she became, perhaps unintentionally, a co-shaping force in the collapse of a world that also pulled her children into the abyss with it.